varsity race was in the bag for us, though, and it capped one of the greatest seasons in Cornell history. Not only had the varsity gone undefeated, but the Big Red JVs had followed in their footsteps with no defeats in any of their races. The town itself was over 800 years old, and the drawings were to be held in the town hall, which dated from the very beginning of Henley. The race was 118 years old. We took a time trial to get used to the course. It was shorter than any course on Cayuga. It was lined with log booms on either side and was as straight as a bowling alley. The river was so narrow in spots that only 2 crews could race at the same time. The shell started from gates, much like the start of a horse race. The course wasn't wide enough for a power boat and a crew at the same time, so everyone had to pedal after their crews, including Coach Sanford. Close behind him were 3 spies, 2 Englishmen and 1 Russian. They wanted to know our time nearly as much as we did, and came within a second of finding our exact time in that trial. As we approached the finish line in front of the empty stands, the crew was looking good. But somehow it wasn't the same crew that won the IRA. Something was wrong, but what? We didn't have that feeling of complete exhaustion that comes after a well-rowed race. We took the shell in and walked over to the next tent to talk things over. We didn't know the exact time, but we could tell by the look on Coach's face that something was off in that time trial. It's the style that we row, long and smooth, with the power on all the way through. It seems slower than the Russian style, but it's better in a long race because the crew doesn't tire as fast. Russia put their shell in the water and paddled easily away from the dock. We pulled our shell out of tent number 6, and Carl guided it by the bow through the crowd out toward the water. While our manager made sure the riggers were right, we went back up to the tent to get our oars. Coach gave everybody a few last words, as if they were necessary. Every man knew what he had to do. We knew that the Russians might have a chance to get ahead at the start because of that fast, choppy stroke they row. But our big chance was in the middle. As soon as the shells were in the starting gates, the starter raised his flag, and we were off. Russia did get off to a fast start, and the crowd at the finish line could hear it over the loudspeakers. Russia had a 1/4 of a length in the start and was opening it to 1/2 a length in the middle. And coming down with 1/2 a mile to go, the lane signal went up. Russia was still ahead, but now by only a few feet. Both crews were ready to sprint, and we were still closing in on the Russians. Russia was tiring fast. They kept a high stroke, always 2 above us, but with a 1/4 to go, they couldn't hold it, and the lane marker showed that it was Cornell ahead by 1/2 a length, and then 3/4, and stroke Phil Gravink took the beat up in that famous Cornell sprint. The stroke was up to 42, and Russia was lost a full length behind as we swung past the finish line. The time was 6 minutes and 30 seconds, 8 full seconds faster than the previous Henley course record. But before we knew it, it was the next day, the day of the final race. Yale had beaten Queens the day before to qualify for the finals, so we had our work cut out for us. But once again, we had a job to do. Putting the shell in the water was almost second nature by now, but when Phil sat down in the stroke seat, he and the rest of us meant business. Carl grabbed hold of the tiller ropes, got a firm grip on the rudder, and we shoved off. Even Uncle George wasn't sure. We had beaten Yale twice that season, but one win had only been by inches. The race was soon to begin. The shells were painstakingly backed into the starting stalls until the bows were even. Then the referee asked if we were ready. Yale was, and we were. And we were off, and the crowd at the finish hushed to hear who was ahead. Yale was off to a fast start, but not fast enough to catch the Cornell shell. We were moving on them slowly, rowing the same style of race, almost stroke for stroke with them. But we knew that this race wasn't going to be won at the start. It would again be in the middle that the winning crew would assert itself. And that crew did assert itself. As we came down the course toward the crowded stands, we were still moving on Yale, and the markers showed the crowd who was in front. In the final race between two American crews 3,000 miles from home, it was the red-tipped oars of Cornell that led all the way. It was almost an even match, but the Big Red had the extra reach, the extra power, to pull out inch by inch over the Elis until half a length separated the crews. Yale was not going to give up easily. They sprinted hard, but they couldn't make up for what they had lost during the body of the race. It was still Cornell as they crossed the finish line. Carl splashed his hands in the water and threw a spray over the rest of us. We won. The race was over, and the cup was ours. We had the shell in the boat tent in no time. And we grabbed Carl by the ankles and wrists and hauled him out on the dock. All season long, we had waited for this moment, and we were going to give it to him. The race was over, and we had won. We all gathered in the tent to celebrate. Everyone was there. Uncle George, Coach Sanford, Sean Van Horn. Everybody was grinning, and everybody was happy. Todd Simpson took off to send a cable to his wife at home. Bill Schumacher was giving the story to reporters. Dave Davis was signing dozens of autographs. Phil Gravink was eating every orange in sight. And even Uncle George broke training. A few hours later, it was time to present the cups, and all the stewards and officials of the Henley Regatta were gathered up at the presentation platform. It had begun to rain, but nothing was going to dampen our spirits. Our eyes were on that big cup. Our Commodore, Clayt Chapman, got the bowl of the cup, while Carl got the base. And each one of us received a victory medal. Last came John Van Horn, our bowman, who received the Book of Honor, containing the names of every Grand Challenge winner in history. It was time to say goodbye to the inn at Chip Lake and to pack our bags, ready to head for many destinations. Many of us stayed in Europe to tour, while some went home to America. But one thing was sure. All of us went away with a feeling that we had just participated in the greatest event in our lives, and one which none of us would ever forget.